Today we're going to go over the installation of the magnetic shifter kit for the McLaren GT3 wheel by AT3D. You're going to need some needle nose pliers, a Phillips head screwdriver, some tweezers, and an Allen wrench. Let's get started. One of the first things we're going to need to do is take our tweezers and pry off these caps for the rotary encoders. It's important to go slow so that you don't mess up the finish on your wheel. Some of them may be a little bit easier than others. I like to go through the opening in the slot there. It's a little opening, you can get your tool in there. After you've completed that, grab yourself some needle nose pliers and you can remove the caps from these little rocker switches here. The cap and the boot might come off in two pieces, not a big deal. Next, we're going to use my needle nose pliers to loosen the nut on these rocker switches. If you have the correct socket, you can always also use a socket to do this. Now there's three little metal pieces underneath it. You want to make sure you keep all three of them and set them aside. After we've moved both of those, we're going to get rid of the nut and washer on the rotary encoders here as well. I'm going to loosen all three of them, and then you can do most of it by hand because these are pretty high up. We'll make sure we keep the lock, washer, and nut for each one of those and set them. The next step will be removing these 10 screws from the face of the wheel using our Allen wrench. Now that we've removed all the screws, we can take the plate off. And there's going to be a couple button caps here that we're going to also have to grab for the top two buttons there. Next, we're going to remove 7 of these larger screws, and then there's 2 small ones on the LCD panel at the top. Next, we're going to remove these 2 plugs which are attached to the original shifters. After we unplug those 2 cables, we're going to tuck them away just so that they're not in our way, and lift up the circuit board. You're going to find 2 very small screws at the very top here we're going to have to remove. With that removed, we can easily remove the pin at the top, which has been holding in the existing shifters. That pulled right out of there. And then we can remove the rockers there. With that out of the way, we can work on the back. Oh, you know what? We're going to need that piece, so make sure we set it aside and don't lose it. You're going to use a screwdriver or an Allen wrench or something to push the center of these out. Now, they're just magnetically held, so just push the center through and you'll pop the magnet free on the other side. When you flip it over, you'll see them in there and you can grab those magnets out of there and set them aside. You're not going to need them anymore. And watch out, they'll attract all your screws. The next step after we've done that is going to be preparing for the shifter kit. So we're going to remove these 4 screws from the quick release unit. With those screws removed, we can now install our magnetic shifter kit. You're going to feed the plug in through the holes here that have the magnet. It's kind of snug, so just finagle it in there and then fish that line in there. Now, it may get a little bit stuck. You may need to lift it so that that circuit board on the inside gets out of your way. Go ahead and feed the plug in the other side. And then we're going to very loosely attach these to the back. And these do not have to be stuck down right now. They just have to be hand tightened so they don't fall off while you're working on the front. So now we're going to move to the inside. We'll be careful to route those cables nicely through some slots, and I'm going to attach 2 screws here to this circuit board so it doesn't fall out on us while we're trying to work. I move to the back and tighten down these 4 screws that are securing our magnetic shifter kit to the wheel. You want to get these screws fairly snug but not over tightened, and once you got them tightened, go ahead and test your shifters, make sure they work nicely. We can flip that over and now start working on the inside and putting that back together. But, oh, you know what? I forgot this little black piece that fell out, so I'm going to have to take this circuit board back off to sneak it back in there. So we're going to take that little black piece, and there's a tiny little hole on the left here between the 2 screws. You can see you can set it in there, and it matches up with a spring on the back of there. We're going to get that situated, route our cables again back through the slot so it's nice and easy, and then we're going to start reassembling it, all the screws that we took out before. And don't forget the 2 tiny little screws for the LCD screen at the top. Next, we're going to plug in our new shifters into the existing port. And you're going to want to be careful with routing this wire to make sure it doesn't get in the way of the 2 little white button pads on either side of the plug. So I had a little trouble. I unplugged, I rerouted it underneath some wires to try to tuck it away nice. You can see it's a little more clean that way. So you untuck it under the existing wire from the last shifter and wrap it around and back in so it's out of the way. Now you can take the faceplate and put that back on. There's a couple buttons here. They do have little tracks that those buttons need to go in, so be careful when aligning it. After you've got that back on, you're going to put those 10 screws back into the faceplate of the wheel. With that done, we're nearly finished. We're going to work on the little rocker switches. We're going to have these 3 pieces of metal that we're going to have to lay down in the right order. So the first one is flat. It's got a little tab on it. That tab points upwards to the top of it. You should be able to see it on the unit there where it aligns. I'm going to use my tweezers to make it lay flat and get in there just right. We're going to lay down that flat one, followed by a lock washer, and then the nut, and then the other side again, that flat one with the notch facing upwards, the lock washer, and then the nut. The next thing we're going to do is get those rotaries back on there as well. We're going to get the lock washer and nut on each of the 3 of those. You can hand tighten these most of the way. Now for the rockers, I had a little bit of issues with my needle nose pliers getting them back on, so I grabbed this, a little socket driver here. It's an 11/32 socket, and that really grabbed the nut and tightened them down nice and easy for me. After you get those snug, you're good to go. You can put the caps back onto the rotary encoders. You'll see they're keyed on the inside. They only go on one way, so get them on there. Don't try to force it. And then for the rockers, you're going to want to push that boot down to get the boot all the way over it, and then follow it off with a little red cap, and do the same for each side. Just really make sure that boot's all the way secured down there, and then the cap on top. And with that, you're done. You've installed the magnetic shifter kit. You can test them out, feel the nice crisp feedback. It's a lot easier to pull. It's got better response to it. It's not nearly as loud. It's got a lot of benefits over the stock design, and honestly, this orange, I think it looks awesome. It's even got some of that extra play. It's all been tuned out for you, so you don't have any extra travel. It's yeah, it's ready to go, and it's available on my Etsy shop.